online, and of course in the panel over the next hour and a quarter. And I'm going to hand over to Mr. Wallace Chapman at 3:45.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Jesse. Kia ora and welcome to the panel. Well, as we know, coronavirus alert level moved to 3 yesterday, moving to level 4 at 11:59 p.m. Wednesday tomorrow. New Zealand's total of COVID-19 cases is 155, with 4 cases of community transmission, 3 in Auckland, 1 in Wairarapa. 6 people are in hospital with COVID-19, none have been in ICU. And 12 people have now recovered from the virus. And for the meantime, on the panel, whilst the lockdown is in force, we're going to give the panellists a bit of a rest and focus on the experts, interspersed with pertinent questions you have. So if you have a question, do let us know and we will endeavour to put it to the guest. We've had quite a few already this afternoon. Guests today include Associate Professor James Usher from Otago University's Department of Microbiology and Immunology, who says there is already huge pressure on the testing laboratories, and economist Michael Riddell on the extraordinary measures the government is putting in place, those fiscal measures, and how sustainable are they. Also, many questions around e-learning. Albany High School Principal Claire Amos joins us. She has prepared a paper on this. She's also on the board of NetSafe. So the nuts and bolts surely to be ironed out on that. And tell us how you're getting on also. Email us, the panel at rnz.co.nz. Do text us 2101 and do join us on Twitter at the panel RNZ. Well, there have been now more than 8,300 completed tests in New Zealand, and among the many in places under pressure right now are the laboratories doing the coronavirus testing. The experts in the field are calling on public messaging to be very clear about who is being tested and why. Associate Professor James Usher from Otago University's Department of Microbiology and Immunology says there is already huge pressure on these laboratories, and requests to test people who are not showing any symptoms simply should not be carried out. He says there's worldwide pressure on capacities right now, so the public need to know how they are prioritising the tests.
Throughout the country, we're processing over 1,500 tests a day, and this is ramped up from nothing from early January. We've also had to develop these tests. There's no commercial tests, or very few commercial tests currently available. The other massive pressure on the labs at the moment is supply chain issues. So many of these reagents we need for our machines to do these assays, these tests are made overseas. Many of them come from Europe or from America, which are countries that are highly affected at the moment, and we're having difficulties maintaining supply of reagents to perform the number of tests that we need to perform.
How are the tests done? Are they simple or complicated? What is the actual process?
Right, so these are tests that detect the genome of the virus. So we're detecting the virus that causes COVID-19 is called SARS coronavirus 2, and it has an RNA genome. So we need to firstly extract that genome, the RNA, from the sample, either usually a nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal swab or a sputum specimen. And we then need to detect that the presence of that genome by amplifying it up by a method called polymerase.
We'll revisit the question of whether Parliament sits again and how exactly that works. The intention is that there is an opposition majority on this 11-person select committee, and for National we haven't determined who exactly those people will be, and they may change, in fact, depending on what it is we're discussing. I intend to chair that committee, and I think it's a very valuable chance for constructive scrutiny of the government that will make the nation's response to COVID-19 a better and a stronger one. I think it's really important that there is strong scrutiny because, of course, we're dealing with things right now in the next month or two that will affect a generation, both in terms of lives but also many billions of dollars that are being spent. And so we want to make sure we can constructively look at that and scrutinise all that goes with that. Effectively, what I see the committee's role is for us to be asking the questions that New Zealanders would want answered. You can expect the committee to be sitting 2 or 3 times a week. Those times aren't determined yet, starting from next week. And we'll be wanting to make sure we are getting in exactly the people New Zealanders would expect. The Minister of Health, the Director General of Health, Mike Bush, Peter Ombler, the Prime Minister, Grant Robertson, the Reserve Bank Governor and the like, so that we can, as I say, ask the questions that New Zealanders want answered.
Do you think the government is understanding where they should be in terms of that level of alert and where they're going in the next 24 hours?
Yeah, I do in general terms. You'll know that National has been calling for this heightened response. I thought the framework the Prime Minister put out in the weekend was good. The difference of opinion was whether it was 2 or 4. We are now moving to 4, and we wholeheartedly support that. Of course, within that, and no government would get it perfect, there will be things that can be improved, and there will be things that the scrutiny is required on, from the health response through to the economic, and that will be the role of this committee.
Do you have any particular concerns about any elements of the response and vulnerabilities, apart from people's behaviour, staying at home and limiting contact?
Well, I think we want to be constructive because we know that New Zealanders know we're all in this together. I think if I look at it, I see it as being very much, and there are other important areas, education. Actually, there'll be issues of order, I think, potentially. But health and economic are incredibly important. When it comes to health, look, it's no secret we want to see testing continue to ratchet up. We think that is critically important. The tracing regime, what is happening there is important. I think it's also going to be important that we continue to see the health system generally gear up with the equipment and the capability that is required. So they will certainly be personal focuses for me. Economically, look, we know that the situation. We are investing billions of dollars in this, and we want to make sure that that funding from the taxpayers going where it's best suited and where it will get the best bang for the buck. I've seen what Minister Robertson has announced this afternoon. It looks good. I think, though, one piece of feedback we are getting is that the job subsidy isn't necessarily exactly meeting the mark and keeping people in business. Be clear, I support the job subsidy. Yeah, I think it could well be. Exactly. I think the job subsidy is absolutely the right thing. I always supported it for small businesses. My call back a week or so ago was to go further. Now that cap's been removed, again, I agree with that. But, can we go through the settings and make sure actually the money is being spent and it's going where it will make that difference in keeping workers in jobs? There's many other issues, but the sort of things on behalf of New Zealanders, the committee over the next month will day in, day out be asking. This will be something that will be online, potentially on Parliament television. And that scrutiny function, I hope, will actually be constructive and add to a confidence in New Zealanders about what is happening right now. More than that, I believe the parliamentary oversight will ensure that the government improves and lifts its game. I don't say that as a criticism, I simply mean that scrutiny, I think, can make for a stronger overall response for our nation.
Should we be doing everything possible to get Kiwis home?
Yes, I think New Zealanders should be able to return home. We should continue to have our border open for New Zealanders because we have that responsibility to Kiwis. Now, I haven't followed the ins and outs of what Mr Peters and the Prime Minister have said. My sense is they are effectively referring to some practical problems with that, as we have fewer flights and the like. All I would say is, in principle, Kiwis have a right to come home. Where practically we can help and do that, we should be trying to help.
So should we, for instance, pay for flights?
Look, there'll be cases where that's entirely impractical, but Kiwis, I think, have a right to think that their government will be looking out for them offshore. As I say, sometimes that won't be possible. Where we can and it's practical, I'd like to think we would, though. That's what I would want for my family, and I'm sure it's what Kiwis would want for theirs.
What about the level of risk? So what would you suggest we do with those Kiwis like to come home? What kind of quarantine facilities would you make?
You would expect them to be self-isolating the way we have had for others coming into our country. So whatever the process and the rules are to date, that would be the case. In my understanding, off the top of my head, that's a fortnight in self-isolation. Of course, actually, having said that, what we know is everyone is effectively in self-isolation at level 4 anyway.
Would you expect, though, not like get off the plane, go into self-isolation, because we've seen the results of some of that, but would you expect a government control, meeting them off the plane, taking them somewhere, given the level of risk at the moment?
Yeah, potentially. I think that's right. So what I'm really just saying to you is, it seems to me it's right that Kiwis continue to, in principle, be able to come home, that our borders are open to New Zealanders, that where practical, government takes steps to try and assist with that. And you would expect a quarantine type scenario back here when they do come in. Well, look, I don't know. I'm not going to choose the venues. I mean, the reality is we now have a situation, or we will have from tomorrow night, where our schools will be, if not empty, certainly more empty. There'll be a range of public facilities where it could happen.
David Seymour says it was misguided to close down Parliament entirely. Do you believe there's any way that it could have somehow been allowed to continue to function and should it have?
I went in, I'm happy to be pretty upfront with you. I went into the committee meeting this morning where my first best preference was to keep Parliament going in a much more limited capacity with much smaller numbers, effectively like you will see tomorrow, where we will have around a dozen members of Parliament for National, and I expect you'll see sort of around that same number from all of the other parties. It seemed to me that keeping Parliament running, given that I think if we're realistic about this, it could be more than a month that we're talking about, was right and proper. All of that said, as the discussion developed in the Business Committee, and there are different views and preferences, I think we've come to a very good outcome, which still provides the scrutiny that, as Leader of the Opposition, I would want and expect, which is a committee that I chair, that opposition has a majority on, that can ask the questions New Zealanders will want answered.
Was there a particular argument or evidence to change your mind in that process?
Not really. I think there was just a difference of views. I think in simple terms, there was the view I've expressed as my first preference around keeping Parliament going, albeit on dramatically reduced numbers with skeleton staff, and a different view which said, actually, could we have a virtual committee whereby dramatically reduced staff numbers, not really necessarily needing members of Parliament there. For myself, because I see this as a very important role at this time, I intend to base myself in Wellington while this select committee is happening, so that we can, fully focus on it and make sure those questions New Zealanders want answered are being asked and answered.
Even if it is possible from a public health perspective to hold the election on September 19, would you think it's desirable, given New Zealand might be going into the back of a sustained period without a normal functioning democracy?
Well, my answer in the past has been it's too soon to say. In a sense, that is still true. I think the reality is, if you ask any politician worth their salt right now, the real answer is I don't know. And I simply say that because at the moment we're in a position where we have a month without Parliament. That in itself I don't think should be an issue, and were we to get out of that and be able to return to a normal Parliament where campaigns started again, such as Nationals, we could hold an election on September the 19th. Of course, there's many ifs in that, and I don't know the answers to those questions.
The government is moved for mortgage holders to ease the pressure and make sure they stay housed. What about renters? Is there really concern about being able to pay rent?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the general thing I would say about whether it's mortgages or rents is ordinarily, if you'd asked me 3 months ago, I would have said to you, no, look, we don't want a rent freeze. I mean, we want a market situation where landlords are within reason, are free to do what they want. But the facts have changed, and so, my position changes on that. I think we have to have an openness about these things. I agree with the sort of moves being made in relation to mortgages, because there will people who literally won't be able to pay them given that their job has been put on the line, or actually that $5.85 that they are getting, say, from their employer isn't enough. The same is true for rents. And so I think it's a time where we have to put a lot of things on hold and make sure we are looking out for each other. It's not a time for businesses to be putting prices up. It's not a time for landlords to be raising their rents in a big way.
Now that there is a mortgage holiday, would you like to see sort of landlords then not pass on rent to their tenants?
I mean, I haven't talked with my colleagues, so I haven't come to a clear view. I'm effectively suggesting to you, though, I accept putting things on hold. I think, we are in a situation none of us envisaged. And whilst generally, I think, landlords should be free to do as they wish and sort that out in a market sort of setting, that's not where we are right now. We've got COVID-19, we've got people who will be losing their jobs, who haven't got the same income coming in, and so it's not a time to be taking the chance to put up rent, to be putting up prices in the supermarket and the like. I don't think that's the Kiwi way.
Can I just clarify this committee? Will it sit virtually completely? Will it be all online, or will it be like you as chair in a room, or how's it going to look?
I intend physically to be in a room in Parliament. That is the way I want to run it, and I'm encouraging my national members. We haven't sorted out who that will be exactly, but you would think Paul Goldsmith is our finance spokesperson, our health spokesperson, will be there to be physically here, of course, distancing ourselves from each other and so on. But so there is a physicality to it. All of that said, it will also be online, and I fully expect other members of the committees, and indeed, on occasion, those officials that would be presenting to us and then asking our questions to, on occasion, be virtual as well.
So you're looking at setting up a bit like Bowen Room or something, so you're not plenty of room and plenty of room for anyone.
Correct.
And obviously,
Correct. That's how I see it. If I'm proven entirely wrong, don't hold it against me, but that's how I see it.
Is there anything else the government can do to lift the pressure on Kiwi incomes over this time?
I think there's a variety of things. I think we've got to a position as of this week where there's clearly a willingness to do what is needed and to, having saved for a rainy day, invest in New Zealanders on this rainy day. Clearly there's things I would like to see that we aren't seeing, that I think just like, we can put aside our party views, if you like, on rents, need to happen on the other side, if you like. I've been clear now for, I think, probably a couple of weeks about the minimum wage and the need to halt that. And as I say, I think there are technical issues that we need to think through and address in relation to the job subsidy so that employers are taking it up and they are keeping their workers in jobs, which, as I say, unfortunately, regrettably, doesn't seem to be the case at the moment.
Difficulty accessing any of the wage subsidy or, in fact, the stay-at-home leave help?
Yeah, I am, and I'm hearing a variety of things, and I don't criticise the government for this. It's a situation where we are, and these things won't always be perfect, and you learn through experience. But I'm certainly hearing from some businesses, look, we have so many employees, and they're still saying this, even though the criteria and the cap has been lifted, it's kind of not worth our while. They're also saying, some of them, that the problem is, well, at $5.85, in Auckland, our employees they earn significantly more than that, and so we just can't keep going at that level. Our revenue's gone like that, and the 585 isn't enough. You know, what they've done in some countries is 80% of wages and these sort of things. I'm not saying... Correct. Correct. And I'm not suggesting to you I'm designing the answers right now, or I have a perfect knowledge of these things, but I am certainly hearing, and I certainly have, even since the announcements yesterday, over the last 24 hours, there's still just this issue with big employers still going to lay off. And so I just think we need to think that through, because, you know, we've got 2 or 3 big goals here. They're very busy this afternoon. We've got 2 or 3 big goals here. The first one is clearly health, and is coming out sooner and stronger with fewer people, but bluntly, dying. And we need to deal with that. On the economic side, I think the single goal is to keep businesses going and their workers with them. That continuity is crucial, and so this job support package is obviously very important in relation to that. Lucky last. Well, it may be for some, you know, and for those that can, I would certainly encourage that. Look, I'm not suggesting it's all on the government side of the ledger. Businesses have obligations as good Kiwis, and with social responsibilities. But the truth is, there'll be a lot of businesses out there where, look, that job subsidy just doesn't hit the mark, and the gap is so large that they will be letting people off. And so I just think we need to think those things through, with that single purpose of keeping them in business and keeping their workers working for them, rather than being dislocated from that job market. Hey, thanks very much.